So we are going to the very first session now. So it appears to me as if this conference is just starting. So we're going to be having a discussion around the entry points to real estate prosperity and understanding real estate financing. Do you want to buy to let or buy to live in or buy to make money? So to do justice to this, I have the privilege of inviting Aleemah. Thank you very much. And she's going to be speaking on real estate investment and finance, its passion and adequate capital. So do we need more than passion? Let's clap for her.
Morning, guys. Well, is this on?
I don't think it's on. Let me see. Yes.
It's actually afternoon now, but good afternoon, everyone. How are we all feeling today?
Fine.
Good. What I will say to you is the energy in here is a little bit like medium. We need to really raise the energy today because you can't do anything, especially change your life, create a business, anything with low energy. So really do bring the vibes, bring the energy, because if you are serious about coming here today because you do want to change and transform your life, you need to bring that energy. So good afternoon, everyone. That's what we like to hear. So first of all, I'm actually going to introduce myself. So I'm Aleemah. I'm the founder of Hughes Property Investors, which is a property management company. And then I also have a second company as well, which is the AH Group. So a little bit about me. I started my property management company when I was 21. And like some of you today, I can see a few people that I'm guessing a similar age to me. I'm actually 24 at the moment. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have an idea. I went to a few seminars like this. I put myself out there a little bit. I think it all started when I went to a £1 crash course. From a very early age, I always wanted to get involved in property. I was actually saving for a property that I wanted to live in. At the time, I think I had a house ISA where I was saving £200 a month in it, like I'm sure some people do. After going to a few property events and actually understanding the ways that you can create wealth and actually get started in it, because if you're anything like me, I was sat there thinking, how on earth am I going to actually afford this? Like, how on earth can I get started? I'm broke, I don't have any money, I'm only 21, but I just knew that I had the vision that this is what I wanted to do. And I also met quite a few people that were also doing the same thing. So it's just about learning, putting yourself out there. When I went to a few conferences, I went to a few training programs as well. And then I just thought, do you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start my company. So I bought the company. A lot of people, when you say you bought a company, it's like scary. It's not. You can literally buy your company for £60. So don't think too much about it. It's not that deep. But yeah, I bought the company. I then got all the compliances and stuff, which I'll do a bit of a session about later on. And then at the time, I do rent-to-rent serviced accommodation, which is what I'm going to be speaking to you guys about today. I actually didn't have the money to start up. I think at the time I was working a normal job. I was actually a student as well. So I went to Aston University. So I was a full-time student and I was working at Selfridges in Birmingham as well. And I sat there thinking, how can I actually get the money to start my company? Because I wanted to do training. Personally, I thought that I needed a business mentor as well. So I was like, how am I actually going to afford to do this? How can I furnish a property? How am I going to be able to put down, the first month's rent, deposit, so on and so forth. So I actually got multiple jobs while I was at university. I had 3 jobs at the time. So I worked, I think it was 7 days a week for about 6 or 7 months straight. I didn't have any gaps. I didn't see my friends. I wasn't clubbing as much, even though, it's uni. I got that out on the way in first year. At the time, I was working at Selfridges. I was working in a bar. I was working in like a cafe/restaurant as well. So wherever I could find work, I literally went to work, even if it was, and I shouldn't be saying this, but a cash in hand job. So for example, at the pub, I was doing absolutely anything that I could do just to get the cash. A lot of people my age, especially when we're at uni, everyone wants the Gucci this and the new fashion, and it's not about that. I literally I had to get rid of a few friendships. I had to just really focus and say, do you know what? If it's going to cost me a year of my life not being able to buy luxury items, go on holiday, do all of those things. I'm so, so, so glad that I did take that year out, because I would not be standing here today with a company, with money, with, you know, Airbnb properties and stuff like that. And now I'm actually able to go on holiday. I'm actually able to travel. I'm actually able to do those things. So if you are sat there thinking, I'm broke, I don't know how to get involved, maybe it's not for me, it definitely is for you. You just need to really implement it and have that vision. Alongside the property management company, I also run Leicester's first Women in Business networking event. It's the only free networking event in Leicester. So when I first started networking and getting involved in property, a lot of the time you had to pay for networking events. So even though they're not that costly, when you are literally starting a business and you have no money, it's hard to kind of network and put yourself out there. So I've started that. We have a really good group of women that come. If any of you guys would like to come down, please feel free to come. We've got women that do loads of different businesses, not just property related, absolutely anything that you want to get involved in. And then I also have a podcast as well. So I'm a podcast host of a podcast called Girls Like Me. And the reason why I started the podcast is a lot to do with mindset. I focus a lot on my mindset, which I would advise you guys. But a lot of the time when I look at podcasts, it's always from people who have done it, have made it, are millionaires or whatever it is. And a lot of the time you don't hear a lot of people speak about what it is in the process of doing it. And I just feel like I couldn't really relate to a lot of those podcasts, because I'm still in the doing, I'm still figuring it out, I'm still, you know, having all these challenges and stuff. So I have a podcast around women who are starting their businesses, and we're very real and very honest. I'm a very straight up person. I'm not going to lie about it, because I think there's a few people in property that will make out like they're so-and-so or they've got X amount of wealth, when realistically it is hard, guys. Like, I will be honest to you, it is hard to get started, but if you do have that vision and you do really want it, then you can achieve it. So let's get into rent to rent. So just raise your hand if you do actually know what rent to rent is, or if you've heard about rent to rent before. Yeah, a few people. Okay, so essentially when I started wanting to get into property, or my property management company, old Aleemah wanted to buy a house to live in, because that's all what we dream of. And then I thought, you know, I wanted to have big dreams, what I thought before, and own like maybe 2 rental properties, and that would be great. And then I learned very quickly that there's a lot of money to be made out there in property, and it's just about education. So if you sat there thinking, you know, I don't know how I'm going to earn X amount now, I've set myself a goal, like I was speaking to Reg. In the next, I said 5, but 3 years, I want to have £1 million worth of equity in property, and that's what I'm working towards. So when you do learn these strategies, you are able to kind of recycle your money and all of that. So when I first started, I'm not going to lie to you guys, I was in my student overdraft. Obviously, I was scrimping and scraping for money. I was working in bars. I was doing absolutely anything that you could do. So that's what I kind of do. I'm very real on that, especially speaking to people, because especially within the Black community, so I'm half Caribbean and half Indian. But I would say I've been raised by my Caribbean side, so I'm not that close to my Asian side of the family. But within the Black community, especially like within my family, we're scared to speak about money, and I don't know why it is. We're scared to say that we're struggling, and sometimes I used to feel like when I would go to a property event that because I didn't have money, or because I classed myself as broke, I almost felt ashamed and like I didn't belong there. And we really do need to get rid of that mindset, because that's a gap that's keeping you from actually achieving and succeeding. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm broke, or there's nothing wrong with there is something wrong with saying you're broke, because you shouldn't be saying that at all. But there's nothing wrong with saying that actually I'm a student and I'm here to learn, and what you don't know, you don't know. But as long as you are able to get that education, you will be able to proceed. So that was kind of my thought process about it. And now I love being the brokest person in the room, or, you know, whatever it is, because that just means that you're growing, essentially. If you are the most cleverest and you are the most wealthiest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, because you're not elevating, you're not growing. So yeah, that was the kind of process behind it. And then when I started, I got into rent to rent, which is essentially when your company, so my limited company, which is Hughes Property Investors, is the tenant. So if you kind of rent a property for yourself, like my family do, I don't at the moment because I live with family. So my mum, for example, she rents a house. She will rent a house from a landlord, and that tenancy agreement will be in her name. But when you do rent to rent, the tenancy agreement will be in your company's name. So effectively, Hughes Property Investors is the tenant. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Cool. So with that, you are able to pay the landlord whatever it is that they want for the rent, and then you are able to rent it out with the correct contracts, license, insurance, all of that, on platforms such as Airbnb, Booking.com, those kind of things. And whatever you make is essentially your profits after you've paid your cleaners, after you've paid, your insurances and everything else that comes along with it. So first of all, I want to put it out there that there are a lot of conceptions about rent to rent being very oversaturated, and it's hard to make money, and there is a lot of hassle involved in it, and there's all these things that you're going to think of. And if you have Googled about rent to rent and want to get it started, I said to Reg before I came here today, it's actually really funny that I'm doing the talk alongside Adam, because I have called Tranquility Homes about 100 and something times, like proposing to do rent to rent with their landlords and stuff like that with tenants, and they have declined me every single time. So it's great that I'm doing this here today with Adam. But yeah, essentially rent to rent, and that's how you make your money. There are other strategies as well, such as HMOs. Does everyone know what a HMO is, or has anyone ever heard of a HMO before? A few people. So a HMO is essentially like a student property. It's house of multiple occupants. So let's say there was a 4 or 5 bedroom house. I'll go with 4 bedroom because there's HMO licenses and stuff involved. Thank you. I've got a bit of a cough. A 4 bedroom house, and I rented that from a landlord in Leicester. I could then rent that out room by room. So for example, rather than the landlord renting it out to a single let family, I would be able to rent it out room by room, and I would make amount of cash flow, and then I would keep that profit. So they're usually the 2 main strategies that you'll use. I'm not going to speak about social housing today just because that's not what I do, and I don't have a lot of information about it. But I have been doing service accommodation now for, I think, 2.5 years. I do management for service accommodation. I have done apart hotels, block management, everything that you can think of that has gone wrong, I have dealt with it. So if you have any questions, that's great. But when it comes to rent, essentially, what you need to kind of understand is when you are setting up the company and kind of looking for landlords and approaching landlords, you really need to be clear on your goals and what you offer to that landlord, because a lot of people say that they want to get involved in rent to rent, but when it comes to actually picking up the phone and saying, I want to rent your property, and when they say no, you haven't got any objections, or you don't know how to objection handle and those kind of things. So being really clear on what it is that you actually offer to a landlord and why a landlord would want to give you their property is very key. So for example, I'll give you a couple of examples with that. At the beginning, it was really hard for me. When I first started the company, when I was 21, I had objections for a whole year. So I tried for a whole year. I sent out God knows how many letters to landlords. I'd gone into estate agents. I'd called estate agents, and they'd all said, no, we don't want to work with you. And at the time, I thought it was because, I'm 21. Who's going to want to rent their property to me? I don't even know what I'm doing. But I think it was a lot to do with my mindset. And the more that I grew my confidence, and the more that I grew what it is that we do and what we are able to actually offer a landlord, is when people start to say yes. So let's say you have a landlord, and you're going to have all different types of landlords, because you've got to remember that you get different levels of investors. So you are going to get investors or landlords that have maybe 1 or 2 properties. You're going to get landlords that have loads of properties. You're going to get tired landlords. You're going to get it all. And I think with the property market at the moment, there is a lot of people essentially maybe not being able to afford their rent or whatever it is. But what I say to landlords is, I don't use the approach guaranteed rent. I don't really like that. I hear it a lot at other different rents and conferences. You can't guarantee the rent, so you don't want to kind of lie to the landlord to begin with. But in relation to, let's say, where they might have void periods, do you know what a void period is? Where a property is not being let out or not being rented on the market. You could then go in and say, do you know what? rather than you having void periods, I would be able to rent your property for X amount of years. With the majority of the contracts that we have, it's usually 4 to 5 years, just because you want that longevity, is that the word? Longevity, to really make that return on investment back. So what I will propose, so for example, when I call a landlord, or if I go into an estate agent, I will say, I'm looking at so-and-so property and I want it on a company lease. So obviously my company will be the tenant. And let's say if they instantly go, no, or why should I do that? And sometimes landlords actually don't understand what a company lease is or why they would even want to do it. And what I will say to them is, in all of our properties, we have actually spent a bit of money on them. So, for example, some of them have been newly painted. I've just had one that's got wood paneling put in. They are to a high standard. So, essentially, when they are being cleaned and looked after, they are being maintained. So, let's say if they had a tenant in who was on that kind of contract, they're going to get, let's say, scratches on the walls or any damage and stuff like that. But you, as the company lease, you would be able to maintain that essentially, because you want to maintain it for yourself, because you don't want your guests coming in and the property doesn't really look good, because it's about hospitality. That's the industry that you're in. So essentially with my landlords, we have that contract, and if there is, any little damages that have occurred, we will pay for that. In my contracts, it's up to £250. So anything that does happen up to £250, I will cover. Anything a bit more than that, any structural windows, doors, anything like that, then landlord will cover. But once again, you will get to agree that with your landlord, because every landlord is different. That amount might be different. The property might be a different kind of rental value and stuff like that. So that's what we essentially do. Once you kind of get into the idea that the property is going to be well maintained, for every landlord, even though they might object you or say, they don't want it, they don't want lots of people going in and out, they don't want this upsetting their guests and stuff like that, the people that do that in rent to rent are amateurs. And that's the easiest way that I say, I understand, or you may have had this experience, but they weren't me. And that's why you need to be really clear on what it is that you do offer. So, for example, in my business, we have systems in place, and also your clientele that you try to attract is very important. So a lot of the time, people will say, we want to do it because we attract contractors and all these businesses, but do you actually do that? So with myself, sorry guys, I've actually got tonsillitis. With myself, I do actually have quite a lot of contractors. So for example, at the moment, I've had one company in. It's a electric company. There's a building in city centre. I think the council are doing some kind of work on it. Their contractors have actually been staying with us for 4 months now. So that booking has allowed me to travel, and I've actually booked flights to New York, which I'm going in 2 months because of that. So it is stuff like that, but it's about actually going out and having the relationship. So you need to be able to put yourself out there, you need to be speaking to the companies, you need to be this, because a lot of the time people are going to want to say to landlords, yeah, I've got all these people, or I work with this, but you need to actually be doing it. But it is out there. I have a community of friends and we all do this, and a lot of them have relations with, let's say, Leicester Hospitals charity, companies. People do come and stay. Like, has anyone here booked Airbnb or booked through booking.com a property? Yourself. It's very popular at the moment. And essentially, a lot of people want to come and stay because rather than, let's say, a hotel, so for example, the contractors, the worksmen, all these types of clients that you're trying to approach, they will book a hotel, but then they will have to pay for food every single night, food and drink, and it's just not great financially for them. So nowadays they want to book an Airbnb or an apartment because they actually have the cooking facilities to cook, eat, clean, and it's a lot more financially beneficial for them. So in all of the service departments that we have, they are sorry guys, they are fully equipped. So they have a washing machine, fridge, freezer, all the cooking equipment's in them. They've got beds, we have sofa beds, TVs, everything that you can think of which you would need for someone to stay. So when you are actually approaching, you do say that, and a lot of the time people don't like to be honest with the landlords, and they say, just say it's a company lease, just lie to them. I found that approach doesn't actually work. When you actually are honest with the landlord and you tell them exactly what it is that you're going to be doing in their property, they seem a lot more receptive to it. So I have a very good, honest relationship. And a lot of the time, my landlords will actually say, Aleemah, how's it going? Or, have you been busy? Have you been this? And I'll actually be honest. I'll say, yeah, it's going well. It's going this. And a lot of the time, landlords are generally interested. With the type of landlords that I approach at the moment, it's landlords that do have more than one property. So it's a tired landlord. You get quite a lot of landlord. I know, what a luxury it would be to be a tired landlord. I can't wait to be one of them. But it's more the landlords that have multiple properties where they just want their cash. They just want their rent paid and they don't want any hassle, and that's it. And you're actually able to give it to them. The time when they do have tenants, if they don't have like estate agents and management, it's hassle to deal with tenants. It's hassle to deal with guests and stuff like that. But they just want their rent paid and then that's it. So for them, you're number one, you're providing maintenance for them of the property because you want to uphold that standard. And you actually want to do that for yourself as well, because a lot of the time people say that the property is just a means to making an end, and you really need to understand that your serviced accommodation or your property is a product and you do need to be comfortable with the product. I was having this conversation with Reg earlier as well, and Reg was saying to me, the standard that I have in my homes is that I create homes that I would want to live in. And I think it's the same thing for serviced accommodation. You need to create apartments that you would want to stay in, and that all my apartments I want to stay in because they are really nice and I would actually stay there. I've got some that are a bit boring, but I actually really love interior design as well. So I have a field day, I just get really excited by all the lamps, the paint and all of that. But yeah, so when you're saying that to a landlord, obviously you've got the maintenance, you've got the guaranteed rent, you have an honest relationship with them, and it really is that. But I think the biggest thing to do, if you are looking to get into rent service accommodation, is the relationships is going to be key. When you are building relationships, tell people what it is that you do. Even if you've not started yet, tell people what it is that you want to do, because you may not think that someone is a landlord or that someone would accept you or whatever it is, but majority of my landlords now, I actually didn't think that they was landlords until I was having a conversation saying, look, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've started, and then you're being able to kind of maintain that relationship. A lot of the time as well, if you do see landlords and you are trying to attract landlords through websites such as, let's say, Rightmove, Zoopla, Open Rent, Spare Room, a lot of the time you're told to attract landlords through Open Rent and Spare Room because that's directly with the landlord. A lot of the time if you see properties on, let's say, Rightmove, Zoopla, that's on behalf of a property management company, which just means that when you are trying to sell them the idea of rent-to-rent service accommodation, you've then got to go through the property management, like I do with Tranquility Homes, before you actually get the landlord to agree it. So it's just that little extra barrier. But if you are on Open Rent and Spare Room, you're speaking directly with the landlord, nine times out of 10. So once you're doing that, the things that you want to kind of say to the landlord is get them to have a conversation. When you are speaking to a landlord and trying to sell them the idea of, a company lease, like it is when you're trying to sell anyone anything, you want to hear what their problems are. So majority of the time, when I speak to landlords, they'll say, oh, I've had this empty property, or, I've had shit tenants in, or I've had people that have not paid me their rent, or, all of these things. And it's about listening to what they're saying and using that, because even if I was to have a script, and it's great to have a script, people are people and you have to speak to people. So it's important to really listen to what they're saying and then go off on that. So if someone is sat there saying to you, I've had void periods. Okay, well, you wouldn't have void periods because majority of the contracts that we offer are 4 to 5 years. So you wouldn't have that with us. And then if they were to say, let's say, I've had really bad tenants in, I would then say, with all on our properties, and you can give them examples and pictures and stuff. Obviously, if you're just starting out, you won't necessarily have that. So it's really important to just be honest and say that this would be your first, or this is what, when I first started off, I had like a bit of a mood board, a vision board of the idea of what I wanted. So I'd say, this isn't one of my properties, but this is the vision for this property, so that they can see it a little bit. And just say that you're going to maintain it, keep it up to standard, that kind of thing. And then once you, let's say, have negotiated the deal now, they're happy to do, a company lease with you. It's about how to get started. And a lot of the time, this is where people will kind of get the block. And I think this is where a lot of people will kind of die off in rent to rent because they want to do it. They see the cash flow, they see the amount of money that you can make. But when it actually comes to having the property, get it setting up, maintaining it, managing it, that can be the thing that scares so many people. And that, honestly, I understand because sometimes it is hassle, but it's really about your systems and your operations, who is in your power team. So I spoke about this before at the last event that I spoke to. When you have a good power team, it makes so much more of a difference. So for example, I had a guest, so I was in Spain and I came back on Tuesday, and on the Monday night I had someone like try to get into a lockbox. I think it was a homeless person because the apartments are in town, and they've tried to smash off the lockbox to get into the apartment. So I had landed on the Tuesday. I'd seen the picture and stuff on the CCTV, and I'd literally messaged my maintenance man, like, actually, I need a new lockbox replacing. That lockbox was replaced by like 12 o'clock just because he was like, okay, no problem, I'll be able to go and do that. It's about having people in place that are going to be able to kind of be your eyes and your ears, but also when you do need something like maintenance and stuff like that, you've got those people in place that are really kind of like your systems. When it comes to operations then of actually getting the Airbnb set up, so obviously you're going to want to go through the process of fully equipping it, making sure that it looks pretty, I would recommend getting sofa beds in as well because it just means that you can charge for an additional person to stay in the property. So let's say you've got that all sorted. When it comes to the management side of things and operations, I use a channel manager, which is really, really important and which is what I would advise everyone to get. A channel manager, or how do I explain this best? Essentially, let's say if you put your property on different booking platforms, so you can have Airbnb, you can have booking.com, you can have Verbo, you can have TripAdvisor, whatever it is. To manage all those calendars is going to be stress. So essentially, a channel manager is one platform which manages all of those things for you. And then you can communicate and message back and speak to the guests and whatever it is, and that will connect all of them. So if someone books my property on booking.com, the channel manager will block out that date on Airbnb and everything else. The channel manager that I use is Uplisting, but there are other channel managers out there. It's really easy to set up and it's really user-friendly. So that's number one that you're going to need. When it comes to the property then and actually getting set up, so you've got your operations, you've got your listings, you want to put it on booking.com and channel managers and stuff like that. That process usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks because if you are new to, let's say, booking.com, they do certain security checks. So they will send out, let's say, I think it's a little code to actually, to your property to actually say that the property is the address that you've said it is on booking.com and all those things. So that can kind of take time. But when you are in that process, that's when you want to be getting like your professional photography and everything else sorted so that you can just literally put all the properties on at once. And then I think booking.com is the longest one, like I've mentioned, 2 weeks. Airbnb, I think, is the quickest. If you have a property, you can get it up on Airbnb, I think within 48 hours it is. So that's really easy. Once again, there's kind of step-by-step guides. It's not hard. I know everyone's sat there thinking, I'm not going to understand all these different softwares. I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is. But trust me, it's really okay. You'll be able to kind of go through it. They do also give you like step-by-step guides. And then the bit which scares everyone is when you start to get your first bookings in and you've got guests and little bits and bobs will start to go wrong. So a few things that we do with our management, which I found I needed when I started to, manage tens of properties, because when you have one or two, it's like, it's not that bad. But when you have tens that you need to manage and you've got loads of different bits and bobs. So you want to systemize it so that you have as little communication with the guests. So you don't want people calling you up all the time. You don't want people asking you for stuff. The other day I had someone try to call me and say, how do I use the toaster? And I was like, what on earth do you mean, how do you use the toaster? Like, people ask you for stupid stuff. Even though you think people have common sense, people don't have no common sense. Trust me on that one. So I do certain things, like, for example, the guest messaging is key. So when they first book the property, you want to send them out a message to say, thank you for booking the property, so-and-so, we look forward to welcoming you. On uplisting as well, there's a few things that I will do. So I have a security deposit, not on all of them, but on the ones that I feel need a security deposit, you can put that in. So let's say if you wanted to charge, I think mine is £50 per person at the moment, but if you wanted to charge more or charge less, you could do that. I also take ID verification from everyone, which uplisting does as well. You literally just need to click the button and say ID verification on it. The reason why I would do that is because there are a lot of people booking Airbnb and property through fraud at the moment. So you want to make sure you've got the ID of the person to say whoever it is actually booking into the property. I advise you to also get Ring doorbells as well, so you can actually see who it is that's going into the property that matches it up. So if you see, I don't know, myself that I booked into the property in ID, but a completely different person checks in, you're able to kind of see that. So you're keeping on top of your security to avoid things like parties, events, and stuff like that. So that's the first message that you'll send out. Majority of the time, people don't actually see these messages, even though you send them. I know I've all booked a hotel and they'll say, thank you for booking. I just literally see the email, scroll past it, don't care. So they will give you like prompts. So let's say after that first message, you haven't actually filled in your ID, or if you haven't paid the security deposit, I'll send you out another message, and you set them all to, let's say, 7 days in advance, 3 days in advance, 1 day in advance, day of. So that when someone does book the property and they turn up, they don't just turn up to the property and say, oh, I didn't know I had to verify my ID. I didn't know I had to pay a security deposit, because you've already kind of alleviated all those things. Now, when it comes to the check-in instructions, I give a full guide of check-in instructions in terms of how to get to the property, the lockbox code. My instructions are very much specific in terms of what the door likes, left, right, all these details, because honestly, people do not have common sense. You really have to break it down and just dumb it down as much as you can for them. Then when it actually comes to getting into the property, I have welcome books. So I have 2 different welcome books because I'm just a bit OCD like that. So I have one welcome book which will have all the information in for them in terms of like restaurants, where they want to go, theatres, cinemas, bars, because at the end of the day, if you want people to come and stay with you, it's about that hospitality element to it. And then on the second hand, I've also got on the first guide as well, I would recommend you, if you can, get a clickable welcome book, because it makes people's life so much easier. So for example, I can show you guys a demo if anyone wants to speak to me afterwards. Let's say if I was on it and I had a restaurant, Nando's was so-and-so, like 2 meters away from the property. You click on it and it will take you to the exact address and location, because a lot of the time people that are traveling from Leicester, they're not going to know where anything is. So it's just really that hospitality element, and it will help you with reviews and stuff like that. The second one is the how-to guide. How to turn on the heating, how to use the washing machine, how to do all of that rubbish, because people just don't have common sense, like I've said, you can tell. What I also do when I started to manage multiple properties is get a YouTube channel. So even if you say it to people and it's in clear black and white, they need to also see it. So I have videos of myself actually turning on the heating, putting on the washing machine. And because when someone messages me, rather than spending 15-20 minutes on the phone explaining to them how to use the washing machine, how to turn on the heating, I will just send them the link to the YouTube video. It tells you there and then, you can see it, you can copy it, it just makes life easier. So all of these things you're going to want to do because you want to save your time. You didn't get into this to have no life. Like, I've got into this to spend more time with my family, travel, do those things that you enjoy. So it really is important to do that. So what do you do when things actually start to go wrong? When it comes to rent-to-rent and service accommodation, there are people that will say, nothing's going to go wrong, everything is fine. They're lying to you, because stuff naturally goes wrong and stuff naturally happens, and it's okay. One thing that I have learned, or one thing that getting into rent-to-rent has actually taught me, is actually being resilient. And when stuff goes wrong, actually being able to not stress, because a lot of the time I will stress, or if something used to go wrong. I remember starting at the very beginning when someone had a party in one of my apartments and nearly collapsed. I was like, oh my God, how do I get them out? What do I do? All of these things. And now it's just like, it's cool. You get chill, because you get so used to things going wrong and things happening. you're working with people at the end of the day, and you can never control people. You can't control what they do and stuff like that. You can have systems in place, and I have all the correct systems in place, such as the Ring doorbell, the automation, all of that. But at the end of the day, you're working with people. So what happens when, oh God, what bad things have happened to me since being in rent to rent? I know it sounds like I'm trying to put you off, guys, but it honestly isn't this bad. I'm just trying to give you that ideal, realistic view. So let's say parties. I've had a few people, throw parties in there. I think I had a drug dealer in there once as well. I made a TikTok about this. I had I don't know, nice bad, but she was a prostitute in one of my apartments. And when I'd actually messaged her to say, like, you need to essentially leave she didn't actually know that I was the property manager. And instead she sent me a message saying, am I a man or a woman? And what time would I be available? And I was like, oh God. So you are going to get these things happen to you naturally. But it's just about like controlling what you can, and also things like security deposits, ID and stuff like that has helped, because there has been occasions, there was one occasion a few months ago where I actually had to go to the police because this person had a party in the property, and there wasn't much damages, but it was a lot of cosmetic damage to, let's say, the furniture and stuff like that. And they actually weren't willing to pay the deposit and stuff. So it was actually another guest in a property that actually called the police. Then we had gone down there, filled in the report and stuff like that. We'd got all their IDs and information, and then in the end they ended up paying for the damages and stuff like that. So if it ever does get to that point, obviously you've got your IDs, you've got your things. But since starting, I'd probably say this stuff happens like once every 6 months. Like you get it once every now, but I think a lot of people don't speak about it. So as much as I'm kind of saying all these things which make it seem like I don't want to do it, honestly guys, it's not that bad, and it doesn't happen all the time. But on the good side, now I'll speak about everything good that happens. A lot of the time I will get a lot of long bookings, so that is something that we try to do. Long-term bookings is key to making money and having peace of mind, because when you have guests in that will stay night by night, so let's say if you get someone staying in on a Friday night because they want a party, or a Saturday night, there's a lot of costs that come along with that. So your cleaning bill is going to be a lot higher. So when you pay for cleaners to come in every day, they're going to be that bill will essentially build up. So if you get long-term guests in, or for example, like I've mentioned with the energy company, they've been with us 4 months now, it just alleviates those. So with those, they are a bit of a messy bunch, but we have cleaners in once a week, and they're the kind of people that you really want in, because if you are really wanting to maximize the amount of profit that you can make from this, it is a lot better. So for example, I think, let's say if the cleaning bill with them is going to be no more than £120 a month, but let's say if I did it where it was more on a nightly basis, you're getting people coming in night by night, the cleaning bill is probably going to be about £300 plus a month. So you want to try and keep those costs down. Ways that I would say to contact direct clients is literally contact everyone that you do know. Have all of you got LinkedIn? Yeah, get LinkedIn. Try and connect with every single person on there that has a company. At the beginning, I thought that just random companies, wouldn't actually have people come and stay, but you'll actually be surprised of the amount of companies or directors or people that come and stay. There's loads of different ones that you can target. We've also got, have you guys heard of Marks Electrical? They're in Leicester as well. No one knows what Marks Electrical is? No? It's essentially a company where you get like wash machines or your electricals from. Their directors come and stay with us once a month, so we have them as well. So you'll meet people along the line, even though you don't want to approach a company, people will always come to stay. We've also got contracts where we have like professors and stuff from the universities, so I would recommend actually going into the universities, talking to whoever it is that you need to. I have been to every single place in Leicester that I can think of, so this is what I really want you to think about as well. The bookings are not going to come to you, the clients are not going to come to you, you have to go out there, you have to fight for them. I have been to Leicester City Football Ground, I've been to the Curve, I've been to Athena, I've been to everywhere that you can think of, and even on the day, let's say if the correct person that I need to speak to is not there, I will go back and I will get the contacts, I will email, I will call, I will do those things. Following up is what's going to make a difference, because the amount of money that you can make from one of those direct clients that comes and books and books and books and books and books with you again, it's so much easier to try and maintain that custom of someone spending money with you again than it is for you to get new clients all of the time. So you really do want to maintain them, and when they come and stay, you really want to focus on that customer relation. So little things, just making sure that they are okay, if they need anything, the welcome books, how was your stay, you know. And the direct clients, what I will do in all of our properties as well, we have like little welcome packs where we will give them like teas, coffees, biscuits, you know, those little complimentary things that make you just feel a little bit nicer. Because when you go to a hotel and there's no biscuits, you remember the hotels that have got biscuits that you stay at, because I do as well. So just little stuff like that you're going to want to do. Direct clients is key. It's not the end of the world, but it is key, because when you are in months like low season, now is low season. So throughout serviced accommodation, like year, summer is the best period because everyone's out and about in summer. You've got festivals, you've got everything, especially in Leicester when we had Party on the Park, the festival, I think it was Vicky Park or Abbey Park. We was charging in a 1-bedroom property, I think it was £330 for the night, just for one, and people book it. So these kind of events that people come to, you really can maximise where, let's say, I think in one of my 1-bedrooms, I think it was about 1,200 or 1,300 £300 profit after that throughout summer. But in your low seasons, like now is low season, people aren't traveling, people haven't got the money, people are saving for Christmas, you know, all of these things. So having those direct clients and those relationships is really going to make the difference to you. Every month, fingers crossed, there were some months where I thought, you know, am I going to make enough money to pay the rent this month and stuff like that when I first started. But now, through building those relationships and keeping that consistency, you've got that, which really, really does help. After the direct clients, then, another thing that I will say for you guys to focus on is trying to put yourself out there to landlords and stuff like that. So if you are looking at this as a business where you're thinking, actually, so for example, my business plan, I'll let you into my mind a little bit. I didn't have the money to obviously start investing in property, so I wanted to get involved in rent serviced accommodation. I thought, you know, if I get a few units, that would be really great. But now I'm thinking, if I get quite a lot of units within the same vicinity, it makes life easier, but it's also nicer. So what I try to focus on at the moment is getting landlords that have multiple properties. So if I call an estate agent, a little tip that I'll tell you guys as well, is if you call an estate agent and they're on the fence of doing rent service accommodation, rather than saying I want one property, just say like, I'm looking for a block of properties, or I'm looking for 4 or 5 properties, because they will instantly take you more seriously like that. And it just positions you a lot. Even if they say 9 times out of 10, they'll say, actually, I haven't got 4 properties in the space of 1 block. But because you've said that, they already think, oh, this person's serious, oh, this person can rent a property. So yeah, when you make those relationships, a lot of the time landlords will have more properties, and that's where you really want to try and focus, because no one's going to get started in rent to rent just to get one property, you know, to make an extra £500. If you are wanting to get involved, it's because you want to make a few £1,000s a month so that you can put that into something else, whether that's buy property or whatever it is that you want to do with it. But what I will say to you guys is, when you do come into this world and come into it, it's going to be really hard. There's going to be a lot of times where you want to give up. There's going to be a lot of times where, for me personally, I used to cry all the time. In my first year, I think when I was 21, I was crying. I was like, no one wants to give me their property, I can't do this, and all this rubbish that comes along. But you literally just need to feel it, get used to rejection. I love it when people reject me now. Like, I'm going to call Tranquility Homes next week, and I'm going to see if they're going to reject me, because it's nice. The approach that I use now is, if you get a no from someone and someone rejects you, they're not rejecting you personally. So every no that I get, it's just one closer step to a yes. And that's the way that I look at it. I'm like, I don't say how many yeses can I get, I say how many no's can I get, because I know that my yes is going to come. And literally all it takes is one landlord. All it takes is one yes, one landlord to change your life, because the minute that you have that one property, it's so much easier for you to get a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth. So just keep going, keep pushing through. What I will say to you as well is, you've got a really good community here, and that's something that I didn't have when I first started. So if there is a few of you that do want to do it and you are kind of doing it together, really speak to each other, really connect with each other, because when you're low, that's when you need your friend or your family or someone to kind of bring you back up and say, actually, you can do this. So I would advise you to go to lots of property events, networking events. You can go to some that are free. I think there's a few free ones in Leicester as well. You can go to some that you pay like maybe £5, £10, whatever it is, but really keep that community, because one thing I'll say is when I first started out, I had a lot of mindset things that I needed to work on, because part of actually getting wealth is believing that you can do it and that you are worthy of it. I think that's something that we don't actually think, because me, to sit there and think that I was worthy of making thousands of pounds, it just doesn't make sense to me, especially when you've got a normal person working a normal job that will make, let's say, £2,000 a month. You sit there and think it's actually so easy. So I also work at the moment as well. And when I'm at work and I see a booking come through, I'm like, I've just made this booking and I haven't really done much. Like, do I deserve that, when actually I'm putting all my time and hours into being in a job? And it's really about focusing your mindset on that to steer away from that, because you are worthy of it. You do deserve it. There is so many landlords out there and so many property out there, and people are going to say, it's saturated. And guaranteed, when you call an estate agent or call a landlord, let's say if I call you guys on Monday, you would have already had at least 4 or 5 people call you, doing the same approach, pitching the same thing, but you need to just get used to the fact that no one is you, and that's the approach that I use now. So it doesn't matter if I go to an estate agent or a landlord and they say no to me, because I know nobody is me and nobody can offer what I offer. We may all be the same, but I think it's about actually creating a product that you like, that you feel comfortable selling, and just knowing that whatever is meant for you, it will flow to you. Because at the beginning, I struggled so much and I had so much rejection. And then I seen one of my friends getting here. And then sometimes I was comparing myself. Obviously, comparison is the thief of joy. We know that. But I'd compare, I'd say, how have they got this many properties? I still haven't got none. Like, it's been a year now. So I think it's really important to just tune in, because sometimes you can't change your cards or you can't change your life. And I think that was a big thing for me. Like, when I spoke about actually starting and working 3 jobs, my friends thought I was crazy. They don't work that many jobs, but at the same time, your friends or some of your peers not have the same aspirations as you, or they may come from different households as you, or they may come from different incomes. And my mum and dad, I don't really speak to my dad. He's been in and out of prison since I was a child. But on my mum's side, she has always done her best to provide for us. But it's not like I had all these opportunities and felt like it. So whatever it is, or your circumstances, stop comparing them to other people. Your life is your life. You need to be really grateful for it and just really push through. Because if there's one thing that I do want to say to you guys, it's all about just pushing through. So now I'm going to get onto the compliance side of things. There's a reason why I didn't have a PowerPoint today, because when I first used to go to property events and have PowerPoints with like numbers and insurances and stuff like that, then the analysis paralysis was coming and it was just clocking out. But honestly, guys, the insurance side of things, it's not rocket science at all. You're going to want your limited company, which is obviously going to be the tenant. So you set up the limited company. I think when I started mine, it was about £40 to £60. I just set up my second company. I think it was 4 months ago. That cost me £60 again. My accountant actually set that one up for me. You can go on to, I would advise you to get an accountant to do it with you, because when I actually set up the first company, there was things in it like, I'm trying to even remember what it's called. Do you know, like all the shares that you do in a company and who owns this and stuff like that? I have no knowledge of that. That just goes in one ear and out the other ear. And I think stuff like that can put you off. So when you do it with an accountant, they can kind of explain it a little bit to you. I think one thing that's important as well is, like, if you don't know something, just ask. And I really struggled with that at the start, because even when it came to I think it was my first year in my company, and it was like a confirmation statement, and I was stressing. I was like, oh my God, a confirmation statement. And then once my accountant told me, I was like, is that all I've got to do? It's not even hard. So just ask. But yeah, I'm blabbling on now. You've got to get your limited company set up. Next, once you have set up your company, you're going to need ICO, which is data protection. So essentially, if you are getting people's details, let's say I take IDs, their addresses, their bank details, stuff like that, you're going to need that just to protect you. And just make sure, obviously, you do all the training on that. I think it's one training that I do a year, like a safeguarding data protection course that I would do. I think it's about £12 a year, so it's not expensive at all. The ICO, if I'm off the top of my head, I think it's about £45 for that, yeah. So it's not too expensive. Insurance-wise, what you're going to need is public liability and indemnity insurance. So with that, you get different limits to that. So essentially why you need public liability and indemnity is if, let's say, there was an accident in the property, or if something happened, let's say if someone broke their leg, or, you know, any damages or whatever that occurs, you're kind of protected up against that. You can also get contents insurance, but you only get that once you actually have the property, because that's insuring the contents that you've got. So for example, your sofa, your TVs, your electrical items and stuff like that, if there are damages. Then the last thing that you're going to want to sign up for is a redress scheme. So there's 2 of them, but I only remember the one that I've got, which is property redress scheme. I'm not too sure what the other one is called, but you're going to need that essentially to become a member of that. I think I paid about £200 for that. Yeah. I think it's about £200. Obviously, if you're an estate agent or something, that cost is going to be a lot more. But for you just starting off, it's not that much, and you have those yearly. With the contracts, then, if you are to do rent to rent, there are contracts available. I don't know if any of you guys have done training. So when I first did my training, they gave me like a template contract. I do have some template contracts. So if anyone wants one, I'm more than happy to share that with you. But I did actually get my contracts looked at as well. So it's very important not to just have a contract, sign it. You need to know what it is. I had to sign a contract this week actually, and I Googled so many words because I just still didn't understand what half of them meant. So getting your contracts. When you do have your contracts, you want to make sure that key things are obviously the rents and stuff like that, the contract length. So is there a break clause in the contract as well? So let's say if I took on a property and within the first 6 months I made no money on that property or whatever, I would have a break clause to say, actually, I want to let the property go and stuff like that, especially if I've signed up for a 4 or 5 year, because you don't want to be stuck in a contract on either party's side if you're not actually going to be able to deliver that and pay the rent and stuff like that. So that's really important. Another one is damages, like I've mentioned. So in my contracts, I have the limit of £250. Do what feels comfortable to you. I spoke to someone the other day where there was like, my landlord wants me to put a limit for £700. You need to be realistic about it and actually understand, because when, let's say it's a normal tenant and stuff like that and things happen, the landlord isn't going to say to them, I want £700. So £250 is a good enough limit in my mind, because it will pay for, let's say, cosmetic. I think I've had a door handle break, repainting, you know, that kind of stuff that will happen. Is there anything else I can think of? So we've said, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest things that I'll say for you to kind of look at in the contract. Obviously, you have your deposit in there. Most landlords will ask for the first month's rent and then obviously the deposit. At the minute, what I'm finding a lot of people say that are getting new into property and rent to rent is they're offering, let's say, 2 or 3 months rent up front because they want to take them seriously. So you guys need to remember that as service accommodation is becoming more saturated, more people are wanting to get involved, more people are understanding how it works, you are going to be in competition naturally with a lot more people now. So if you do want to kind of step out, and I've got one person who is just offering, you know, a deposit and 1 month's months upfront rent, if I was to sit there and say, actually, I can offer you the deposit and 2 or 3 months rent upfront, they're more likely to take you a bit seriously. But that just means that obviously you do need to get on your savings and make sure that you can actually afford that, as well as setting up the property. Going into costings then, when it came to setting up the property, obviously you've got all of your insurances, which I believe, no, shouldn't be more than £400. I don't think it cost me more than £400 to get set up. Then actually getting the property, obviously I did first month's rent and deposit, and then generally speaking on, let's say, a 2-bedroom apartment, I wouldn't spend more than about £6,000. When I first did it, I went down the route of wanting everything luxury and a boutique look and stuff like that, and I actually wish I didn't do that to begin with, because it wasn't very cost effective. Majority of the things in that apartment I've now had to replace. So it's about buying items that are, I'm not going to say cheap, because if you buy cheap, you buy twice. I'm a very firm believer of that. But make sure it's a affordable, logical decision. You don't need to have the nicest of everything in there, because things are going to get broken naturally. Sofa beds, like I've mentioned, you can get sofa beds from anywhere. Some places like Amazon and stuff, if you look for a good deal, you can get them on there. But you want to go for about that £6,000 mark. If I see someone and they say to me, I did my whole rent service accommodation in like £1,000, I just sit there and think, what on earth is in that property? what I would say to you is, when you are looking at spec, make sure that it is not low end, because there's so many low end properties on booking.com and Airbnb, and as it has become more saturated, no one just wants to stay in a property that has grey walls and yellow. You see so many of them, and they're always on like the 10th listing on booking.com. If you really do want to be on, like, let's say the first 3 pages, because they're going to be the pages that people automatically buy from more, you do want to actually make sure that you stand out. Put a bit of colour in there, have a mood board, have a vision. Pinterest is free as well. Everyone can go on Pinterest, but around that £6,000 mark is what I would say. Obviously, if the property is a bit bigger, so I've got some clients that have 4 or 5 bedroom properties. Obviously, the beds, the mattresses, it does add up. So probably, let's say £8,000, that's what you're going to need to start out. And I know what you sit there thinking, how on earth am I going to get this money? How can I do this? How can I whatever? But there are ways to get around it as well. So if you are starting out, I think I personally haven't done it, but there is companies where you can, let's say, pay in 3 for certain bits. Like if you were to order a sofa, you could pay in 3 for the sofa and spread that cost over 3 months. There are options like that as well. But when it comes to the kind of biggest cost that I would say is, you've got 2 routes that you can go down for linen. So obviously when the cleaners come in, they are going to want to change the linen and stuff. I used to buy my own linen, but just because of the damages and stuff that would happen, it was very costly, and I don't buy cheap linen, because you know that feeling when you go into a hotel and the linen's nice, and I think the thread count that we were using is 200 thread linen, but it's just too costly to always replace. So now my cleaners, I've got a clean and a linen service, but you want to look at that, because if you have got linen, I know plenty of people that do pay for their own linen, it does work as well, but it's just the I haven't got time to keep going to the laundrette and stuff like that and doing it myself. So, and it's just a bit time for me. But let's say if you were just starting out and you had 1 or 2, maybe you'd want to do that to cut costs at the beginning and stuff like that. So I'd say that. When it comes to it, like if you've got your costs, let's say your biscuits, your this, your that, those kind of things, I would always buy on Amazon. That's the cheapest that I found at the moment. But looking for things, you're really going to just need to shop around for it. Just compare, don't buy the first thing that you see, but have a clear vision. So if you've got like a Pinterest board or whatever it is, a lot of the time people come to me, especially for management, actually, they'll say, I'm getting no bookings, I'm struggling to get, bookings, I can't get people through the door, I'm on low occupancy rate and all of that. The first thing I'll do is let me see your listing. So a lot of the time people have properties. Number one, you need to remember that when people are booking an apartment, it's completely on looks. So I would say get a professional photographer to do all the pictures, make sure that it looks good, stage it if you need to. A lot of the ones that we have, they'll have like Netflix on the TV, breakfast, go to Aldi, get some croissants and stuff like that, and really stage it when you take your photography. Secondly, on the actual listing, you want to make sure that there is loads of information on there. So how far away is it from city centre, restaurant, transport links is a big thing. If people are coming to Leicester, parking, what else would you put in there? Loads of different things that you can put to kind of market it. You need to think, if I was the person booking it, what would I want to know, or what would make me want to stay in the property? So yeah, include all of those. And once you've kind of got to the stages of it's up and ready, you've paid for everything, you've got all your insurances in place, and now you're getting the first bookings in, it's really about maximising those bookings. So I have the approach in my business that once someone books through, let's say Airbnb or booking.com, you never want them to book through that platform again. So essentially, for every person that comes through booking.com, you should have all of their details, and then you need to get them to book through your direct booking site, because there are costs that are associated to Airbnb and booking.com, which are usually 15%. So you just think, if I'm charging £100 a night, they're going to take £15 of that. So next time this person wants to come and stay, I want them to come and book directly through me to save that £15. So that's the approach that you need to use. You can contact them through, let's say, every time a person checks out, I will send them a message to say, we hope you enjoyed your stay. Can you leave us a review? And here is, I usually give 10% off, because it just makes life easier. 10% discount code to book directly through us, and it will just entice people to come directly through you. Booking platform wise, booking.com is okay. If you do have anything like anything go wrong during the property or damages and stuff like that, they are okay. You can put a request through, but I'd probably say about 9 times out of 10, you don't really get much from it. So if you do have booking.com, I would say probably put a deposit on it, but make it a low deposit so that people still want to book, because if there is a high deposit on it, a lot of people are going to want to deter from booking it. On Airbnb are really, really well. You really want to maintain your reviews. That will push you up to being a super host. I think I've been a super host for a year and a half now, which has been really good. If you have any damages and you put through a claim on Airbnb, I've never not been paid for a claim. They will 9 times out of 10 always pay it. You've just got to provide, let's say, receipts or pictures and stuff like that. The only thing that I will say to you when doing stuff like putting in claims or contacting guests, Airbnb are very on it. So the minute you will try to get them to be a direct client or get them to come to you, they'll basically catch up on it. So you never want to put anything like send me money or give your bank details or send a number. You can't send a number. They'll instantly block you as well. They'll block you without you even knowing. Email addresses, main contact details like that, avoid. A lot of the time when I have needed to do it, rather than sending, let's say, 0116, I've literally written 011. It is a bit longer, but if you are trying to reach out to people, that's how you do it, because they will block you. But they are very kind of supportive on that. You do get other booking platforms, but booking.com and Airbnb are probably the top 2 where majority of people do get their bookings from. Booking.com, obviously, the amount of money that they put into it and marketing, that's always number 1. With the booking platforms as well, you do also get account managers. This is something that I don't hear a lot of people speak about. So every person that has their booking platform, you get an account manager. So get in contact with your account managers, because they will give you information and tips about, for example, my patch is Leicester. So my account manager for booking.com, she will say, this was the occupancy rate across 1 or 2 bedroom properties in Leicester. These are the properties that are doing best. These are what your competitors are charging and stuff like that, so that you can see. It just helps get a real insight from actually the people that are booking it through the platform. If you haven't obviously got a property yet and you wanted to do a bit of research like that, there is a site called AirDNA, which you can go on for free. So you can see, for example, if your location isn't Leicester or whatever else, you can go on AirDNA and put in best property or whatever it is, and they will kind of give you that those details, and that's for free. But I will kind of continue on this a little bit later. Anyone that wants to pull me for a chat, more than welcome to have a chat with you guys. Like I've mentioned, I have the Women in Business Networking event as well, but feel free to message me on social media. If anyone needs any tips or guidance, I'm more than welcome to help. But that is everything from me, guys. Thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, she just downloaded about 60 unit credits course in 1 hour. From the strategy, getting into it, the marketing part of it, interaction, relationship, and then she spoke through each of those platforms. Wow, that's. Can we clap for her again? I think it's just wise for us to alter our program a little bit and take some questions while it's still very hot. So if you've got questions for her, can we take 1 or 2 or 2 or 3? Okay, 1. Wow, see hands. All right, sir. So you will be the first. Yes, sir. And then we'll just take 3 so that you answer 3 at the same time.
Yeah, my question is around the pricing. How do you do your costing and then put a pricing on the rent?
Okay.
So usually when it comes to costing, I will take a look at, let's say, your competitors. So what are the people charging? What also is the property? Because you don't want to just go in too low end. A lot of the time when I speak to people, they're like, oh, I'm not getting any bookings, so let me just reduce my rate. Usually when you do that, it's not good, because that's when you get the wrong kind of clients that you don't want to attract in. So what I will say to you is always have a look at your competitors. And you'll generally get a feel for it. Pricing is something that I'll say to people you need to adjust every day. So every day I wake up at 6 a.m. The first thing that I do is look at my bookings and look at my pricing, because even if you reduce something by £5 or £3 or whatever it is. Usually the odd numbers are the best because I don't know what it is. People usually book with odd numbers. So if I put £100, but if I put £102 or £103, or people usually go on that. But the biggest thing I would say is just look at your competitors, go from them, but just make sure that if you are comparing your prices, it's a good comparison in terms of the size of property that you've got, the standard of property that you've got as well. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Second question. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Aleemah. I really learned a lot. So my question is going to be about the level of renovation you can actually do on a property that you rent from a landlord for rent to rent.
Yeah, so I would say that that's per property, so that would be agreed with the landlord. But my biggest advice for you is you don't want to do too much of a renovation because it's not your property. So you want to find a property that needs minimal. So when I say renovation, it's usually paint. I put wood paneling in on literally one wall, but nothing more than, let's say, paint, wallpaper, a few nice light shades. Because if you're going into a property and you're having to change things like doors or tiles or stuff like that, then it's not worth it. I've seen properties, and I've got clients that have properties as well, where, let's say, the flooring is a little bit bad or tiles, but you can get, let's say, the stick-on flooring tiles or things like that. But just try and look at affordable ways to renovate it. But I wouldn't sit there and spend loads on someone else's property, because at the end of the day, you're doing it to make an investment so that you can invest for yourself. You don't want to invest in the landlord's property. Yeah?
Thank you. Third question to the back.
For the rent to rent, you've got a 4-year lease, all right, and then within the first 6 months before the break clause, you have a void property. What do you do?
Say that again for me. So after the 6 months?
Yeah, before the 6 months break clause, the property is void. You do not have someone in there. What do? You've got to pay rent to the landlord.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
So part of that, I put it in there, but see, it's a bit hard, but I never have had a property that's void. I've never been able to not make my rent to a landlord. If you have a property that's void, it's usually down to the aesthetic of the property or the marketing. I'd probably say marketing number one, because there's no reason on earth why you shouldn't have people come through to you. People are coming to stay. People have money to stay. It's just about where they're going and booking. But if you are in a situation where you've taken a property and you do have a void period, just make sure that you do have that backing, because you're in a contract and you still need to pay the landlord at the end of the day, yeah? So you do have to pay, even if you've not had anyone in. It's still your responsibility to pay the landlord.
All right, thank you. Next question.
Good afternoon, Aleemah. Thank you very much. I think I'll go with them. I learned a lot from you. But there's this book I like to use. It's called For Dummies.
Say that again.
For Dummies.
Okay.
Yeah. Like you said, people out there are really not that brilliant. Yeah. So
For Dummies.
Yeah, for
dummies. Yeah.
So two things here. Pardon my accent. So I will tell you this, or I'll ask it this way. For someone like me, I'm an entrepreneur back home. Here, I'm working a 9-to-5 job. I don't have an idea about all you said. I want to get very much involved in it. But now, the rent-to-rent thing is, throw more light on it for a dummy. I make a phone call to a property owner, a landlord, or a maintenance management company, and the property is £1,000. I want to rent that property to rent it out to someone else. Am I going to offer £1,000, or I'm going to go less than £1,000? And how do I convince them to give that property to me on a lesser amount than the one being advertised? Then secondly, for someone like me, having an accent, not looking as beautiful as you are,
Thank you.
how do I get them to speak?
Listen to you.
How do I get them to listen to me? Do you understand? Because it is, you pick up the phone and you call me. I'll listen to you. I'll listen to you. But if I pick up the phone and call myself,
Why are you going to listen to her?
I'm like, Why am I going to listen to myself? Because first off, I just said for dummies. You can hear me even, you didn't understand what dummy was all about. So how am I going to communicate? Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are making sense. Number one, I would say
One more.
there's nothing wrong with your accent. If you've got an accent, there's nothing wrong with that at all, firstly. And it's just about the way that you position yourself, I think. So you just, if people can't hear you or people can't understand you, you need to make them understand you. You need to make them hear you. But position is probably the biggest thing. So I'm speaking in front of you guys now, but 2 years ago I would have never been able to do this. I think the first time I got on stage, I was like this, I was sweating, my legs were shaking, but I think it just comes with time and practice. But like you've mentioned about the £1,000, I always try to negotiate because sales is sales at the end of the day. One of the biggest factors that you can say to a landlord is, especially if they're on, like, let's say Rightmove or Zoopla, and they've got a property management company, and usually I will say you don't have to pay property management costs. So usually the costs are, let's say, 8 to 10%. So if that's £1,000, 10% of that will go to the estate agent. So because you're managing the property and the contract is directly with the landlord, they won't have to pay that £100 to a estate agent or whatever else it is. That's obviously if it's direct to landlord. So you can say, actually, because you're not going to have this cost, can I actually do this, including the extra maintenance and whatever else that you do? Because you can feel away from a landlord, which is how I used to feel, like, why would they want to do this, or what have I got to offer? But when you actually come from a position and position yourself, actually, I offer a really great service. I provide a really good product. I actually work really well. And I think it's when you come from the position of that, then you're actually able to sell the landlord, actually, they do offer a good product. They are actually a good person. They actually will do this and maintain the property. So one, obviously think about the cost that they're going to pay to an estate agent, and two, actually being just confident on your service will help them, because like anything when it comes to sales, if someone has a really shit product but they are, sorry for swearing, if they are not confident in the way that it comes across or something like that, you're not likely going to buy from them. But if someone has a terrible product but they are lively and they are this and that, you're more likely to buy into them, because people buy into people. So it's not essentially how they can, when it comes to property management, I find that a lot of my landlords buy into me as a person, so I can be quite talkative to them, or I will, when they're having conversation, I could probably get to know you in the next 2 to 3 minutes, and then I will talk about things that you essentially like or that we can relate to. And it's about finding that path where you get them to buy into you, rather than the company lease that 5 people have already called them about and 5 people have already asked them about. What is going to make them buy specifically into you? And just from the way that you stood up, you're a funny person, you're a lively person, you've already got that confidence. You just need to be able to pick up the phone and sell it to a landlord. Yeah?
Thank you. So we've got 3 more questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Aleemah. It was really a wonderful session. Touched on so many areas. So I'll just ask this question quickly. From a practical point of view, if you could use one case study from one of your properties, what would you say the average time for rate of return on your investment is?
Okay, so,
And
sorry, go on.
just add, because I've heard about rent to rent, and I've also heard that the taxation bits in terms of Airbnb and service accommodation is a bit on the high side. Can you throw a bit more light on that and just educate us a
So
little
when you
more?
say tax, is that the tax the company pays, or do you mean the 15% in booking fees? The tax the company pays. So with that, obviously, you're always going to get taxed for everything. I don't personally think it's anything that's been bad. Obviously, you pay your 15%, but they are bringing, sorry, I've got the cold. They are bringing things into place, but at the moment there isn't much, what's the word? For my company, so I'll be honest with you, I don't know how much tax I've paid off the top of my head. I'll just kind of leave that to the accountant. But when it comes to stuff like that, I wouldn't stress yourself out too much about it, because when it comes to that, or when I hear people speak about VAT, you know, I don't want to make 90k to be on the VAT threshold. For me, that kind of mindset is just, why would you not want to earn that much amount of money? Do you get what I mean? To pay the tax, it doesn't matter. And then what was your first question that you said? Time takes to, so essentially the rule that I will use is I'll give myself a year. So I'll be honest with you, in majority of properties, you can make back. So let's say if I do £6,000, I would want to make £1,000 profit a month and then earn that back within the first 6 months. So, but I would give myself a year, I would say to a year. So whatever you put into the property at the beginning, let's say including the rent and the deposit, round it off to about £8,000, £8,500, you want to make all of that back within the first year. And then everything else after that contract is essentially, it's not free, but you know, it's your money after that. And fingers crossed I have been able to do that. And it has worked out, but you need to have that approach. But if you do set yourself that target, you really need to focus on marketing. It's not something that you can just half-heartedly do. You do need to actually say, I'm going to get the customers because I'm going to make my investment back. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Very much. We've got 2 questions here. All right.
Thank you. That was a very brilliant one. I have a couple questions. So one is, how do you know when a property is on the avoid period? How do you find the tired landlords? And have you ever had any issue with the level of renovation to a landlord's property, and what did you do? Because I currently rent a space, and to just change wallpapers, the landlords are like, no, you can't do that. So how can you actually take that step?
So you said 3 questions. I'm trying to think of them. The first question was about how you find tired landlords. So what I've mentioned on booking platforms, if they're on open rent or spare room, 9 times out of 10, they're your cheaper landlords that want to cut costs. Are there any landlords that are on spare room or open rent before I say this? But essentially, they're your landlords that don't want to pay the estate agent. And when you get landlords like that, it's usually about costs, and they're usually the tired landlords. Also, when it comes to, let's say, renting, there's signs outside someone's property if they have like multiple boards or, you know, rent my home and stuff like that. Another thing that I will see is estate agent. So that's the direct to landlord side. But if it's estate agent time, you can see if multiple estate agents are advertising the same property. That's usually a key indicator as well. So, for example, Hart might be putting the same property up as another estate agent. That's usually a key indicator that the person's desperate. And then number 3 is actually just speaking to people. Even though you can have a look and they will give you key indicators, actually putting yourself out there, speaking to landlords. You can go on, let's say, land registry, and I send out marketing and letters. I don't know if Adam would have had one before, but I always try to go with like a colourful or shiny envelope, because if you see a letter that's black, white or brown, you try to avoid those. But if you see, I don't know, a blue one or something, you think, oh, what's this? And then more likely to open it. Send those out to landlords. You get all their details and addresses and stuff like that on land registry as well, so you can target people like that. But biggest thing I'd say to you is just putting yourself out there. Half the time you don't even know that people are landlords, because not many people are going to say, I own these amount of properties, I'm this. They're not going to be flaunting it. Going to networking events, meeting people. If you do want to meet property investors, go to a lot of property events as well. I've met so many landlords, and just telling people what you do. So like, for example, I mentioned I still work. I was having a conversation with my boss. He kind of knows like what I do and stuff like that. But he's like, oh my God, Aleemah, I've had a property that's been void for 6 months. And I was like, Tim, are you crazy? And the property's in Wigston. And I said to him, would you let me rent the property in this? And he's like, yeah, let's try and do something if we can. I would have never known if I would have never had that conversation with him to say what it is that I do. So just tell everyone what you do.
Okay. All right, please. Okay.
So thank you so much, Aleemah.
Can 2 of you ask the questions at the same time so that
Of
he's
course,
just going to...
yeah. So thank you so much.
No, it's
really
okay.
been inspired just listening to you. I want to ask a question about due diligence.
Yeah.
So how do you know a property that will make profit for you? And location is so key. So, because I'm just about to get into it, and some of the properties I'm finding are not in city center. Do you think you can venture into it?
Is this in Leicester? Where are you
One
from?
in Leicester, one not in Leicester. So that's another question. Can you manage a property in the northeast, for example? Would you
Yeah,
feel
of course,
that
if you've got the means to get there, and let's say
Yeah.
if in an emergency you're able to travel there and stuff like that. Location-wise, I would probably say 15, 20 minutes max from city centre.
city centre?
Yeah, that's in car though. So I would probably say like not too far out, but you would still want people to be able to get into city centre, transport links, stuff like that. A lot of the time, for the properties that are in city centre, you don't get a lot of parking. So what we find is they're more for people that will come on shorter stays. It's harder to get contractors in, but the ones that are, let's say, 15, 20 minutes out, they're the ones with parking. They're the ones that are, let's say, bigger houses. So you still can attract contractors. That site that I've used, AirDNA as well, that's a free site that you can use. Literally put in a postcode or put in your city, and it will give you like a map of all the ones that are currently up.
Yeah.
It will say 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, the nightly rate that they're charging, so you can get a rough idea when you're figuring out your costs and stuff like that. And they'll also tell you what's working as well. What else location-wise? You just got to make sure that it's amenities. So is it close to things essentially? So obviously in Leicester, I stick with Leicester because I know it's a really good area. I know the area. But if you're going, what's the other city that you said?
Somewhere in Stockton-Tees, England Barwick.
Stockholm.
England Barwick. England Barwick is
I'm really bad
close
at geography, so I don't know where that is.
It's a new build area and it looks really nice.
Okay.
But because what I'm finding with some of the people I'm seeing, they're traveling to Canada and they don't know what to do with their property. And I'm sort of getting into that space to say, okay, I probably can manage this for you.
Yeah.
But they don't live in close to the city center. They live outskirts of the town.
Okay.
So I'm thinking with service accommodation or HMOB.
Do you know what it is? Even though I say close to city centre, just look at the location, what's in the area, because even I know some people that have quite a lot of Airbnbs in Castle Donington, so it's close to East Midlands Airport. So I know a few of my friends have contracts directly with Ryanair, so Ryanair book out their Airbnb. So have a look at what it is in the area, even though I'm giving you location, just because I think that's easier and that should be key. But if you have got an area that you think would work well, obviously do your research on it. Go onto Airbnb, go into booking.com, put the postcode in, see if people are there, because if other properties are there, 9 times out of 10 your property could be there too. But just make sure it's close to amenities, restaurants, stuff like that, so they've got that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
All right, and the last question. We're going to come back for a panel session because we need to go on break now. Are you still asking? All right, so what we're going to do is this. We're going to take 3 questions at the same time. 1, 2, and 3, and then we go on break. All right? So start.
Okay.
3 questions. So you answer the 3 of them.
Well, it's done a bit of thought insertion.
Okay.
So what I want to ask, but I'm still going to ask anyways, in case you have any addition. I'm pleased to meet you. It's been a very insightful session. I didn't know it was you, the Aleemah, because I was supposed to attend the Women in Business networking event in October, but because of the flood, it was postponed to November 5.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, this is the Aleemah. So I'm so pleased to meet you. To my question, I was going to ask how to evaluate the potential rent-to-rent property, considering, because I wrote it down, how it will be profitable, considering location, which we've answered, talent demand, and local regulations. So talent demand, tenant, I meant to say, sorry, and local regulations.
So tenant demand, similar to what I've said. So you just want to see if, so just to kind of add on from that, what I would do if I'm searching an area, so let's say, for example, Airbnb booking.com, if you actually go into the calendar, so let's say if you want to check dates, if you actually go into their calendar, you'll see what's been booked and what's blocked off. So that's usually a key indicator. If you've got calendars that are usually open, it's an indicator that no one's booking their property. Don't just go off one, do your research and like have a look at 5 or 10 so you can see if people are actually booking in that area. Then tenant demand, you've just got to do research and have a look really to see if people are actually staying there, because that's the only proof that you'll be able to get. What I will also do is, are there any hotels in the area that you're thinking of? Yeah, so go into the hotels and lie to them. Say, so I've done this before. I've gone into local hotels and I've been like, I'm planning a hen do or something for my family. There's about 20 of us. Have you got availability? And that will be a key indicator. If they can facilitate 20 people, that means not a lot of people are booking it. If they can't, it means that people are booking it and they're fully booked up. Does that make sense? Yeah. What else would I do? I'll probably say that's it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So my question is regarding your first year in the business, right? Because considering that that is when you're trying to get the landlords to give you a property. Now, what would you consider that the main reason why you were unable to get a property in the first year is because of your you don't have like a profile experience? Because considering 9-to-5 jobs, they will want you to their big on experience. So do you think it played a role, or how did you overcome it? Like, do they look, do the landlords go ahead and look up your profile to see if you have experience before they give you their property?
Okay, so landlords will stalk you. Estate agents and landlords will stalk you. They will do their research on you. They'll look at when your company was open, stuff like that. But that doesn't mean anything. The only reason why I didn't get anything within my first year is because of myself, and it was because of my confidence. I wasn't actually able to objection handle. I wasn't actually able to speak. When I first started, I was picking up the phone, calling a landlord. As soon as they gave me one reason, I would put the phone down because I just generally didn't know what to say. But what I would say is confidence and mindset. So when I started to work on that, actually look at my product, what it is that I wanted, and be more confident to actually speak to people, that's when you get people buy into people. They will do their research. Yeah, you are going to get people decline you, like I said, because of my age or because I've only just opened my company. But if you are someone that is confident and you are someone that will be able to kind of deliver on that, and you come across as that, they're more likely to be receptive to you.
I thank you so much. I think we're going to go on break now, and when we come back, we still have one more question, but we have to go.
Thank you for listening to this sermon from Envoy Nation. We hope that you were blessed by the message. Stay connected with us on all social media platforms by following at The Envoy Nation, and visit our website at www.theenvoynation.org for more information, resources, and updates. May you continue to walk in faith and be richly blessed. Until next time, take care, and God bless.